Well, the international break's over, and for Middlesbrough, there's no shortage of talking points going into the next cluster of championship fixtures. While the international break has been going on, there's been lots going on. A big interview with Kieran Scott with the club website, in which he spoke about all things transfers, and obviously Middlesbrough now preparing for the next run of fixtures, which includes 5 very, very important matches in the run-up for Middlesbrough's promotion campaign. Obviously, there's been plenty to talk about from a transfer point of view as well. I'm going to go through a little bit of a roundup of everything that's sort of been going on over the last couple of weeks to kind of bring you back up to speed. And there's a couple of little quite interesting talking points coming out of this as Middlesbrough do prepare for the weekend's game against Preston. So if you are enjoying this content, all about Middlesbrough, please do hit like on the video and please do hit subscribe as well. There's going to be plenty more coming over the coming weeks and months. And yeah, let's get to it. So one of the most interesting stories to come out during the international break has been with regards to the move for George Edmondson. Now, he was a deadline day arrival from Ipswich Town. Middlesbrough signed him on a season-long loan deal with the main focus being on providing cover and competition in central defence. Now, Middlesbrough do have quite a number of defenders, but the problem is that we have been struggling to keep them all fit over the last couple of weeks. Darragh Lenihan is on his way back from a long-term injury. He did feature in pre-season, but he's clearly been deemed not quite ready to be back in full contention for Middlesbrough. I guess going into this season, it's kind of a long road, making sure that there's no sort of setbacks there. Dale Fry is currently ruled out as well. Ralph van den Berg was struggling with injury in the couple of weeks before the international break. And then obviously we've had people like Tommy Smith, who's been out for a long time and will continue to be out for a little while longer. So George Edmondson was a player who has come in as cover for Middlesbrough centre-back options, joined from Ipswich Town. He played a key part in Ipswich's promotion from the Championship last season, and the season before that he was a key part of their promotion-winning side from League One. Now, obviously, with Ipswich going up to the Premier League, they completed a number of signings over the summer. People like Jacob Greaves came in from Hull City, and they really have sort of upgraded their squad, and that meant that for Edmondson, first-team opportunities were always going to be limited. Now, the move to Middlesbrough, I guess on surface level, it does seem like a sort of short-term fix. It's kind of an opportunity for him to play first-team football and for Middlesbrough to get some cover. But it's come out over the international break that there is actually a bit more of a longer-term plan in terms of his future. So he's arrived on a 1-year loan deal, but he does only have 1 year left on his contract at Ipswich Town. So that means that next summer, effectively, he will become a free agent. So for Middlesbrough, that leaves the club in a very strong position with regards to what they plan to do with him moving forward. Should he be a success during his time at the Riverside Stadium? Should he be someone who can nail down a starting spot? It might be that Middlesbrough look to pursue a permanent move next summer. If he doesn't impress, obviously Middlesbrough have lost nothing really. He can just leave at the end of his loan deal, and then he would be a free agent to go and sign somewhere else. But it is an interesting one, and it is a bit of an interesting change of pace from what's happened maybe in the last couple of seasons. Something that the Middlesbrough have clearly learned from a couple of years back. Obviously, Middlesbrough had people like Ryan Giles, Cameron Archer, Ramsey, all on loan. People who had real high quality, high potential, but people who were never going to be signing for Middlesbrough on a permanent basis unless we were playing in the Premier League. That obviously left Middlesbrough in a very tricky situation that summer, in the summer of 2023. And that's something that Kieran Scott and the Middlesbrough recruitment team have clearly learned from. Last season, they were a little bit more wily with how they were doing loan business. Obviously, the priority is always going to be to bring in players on a permanent basis, but Middlesbrough signed Sam Greenwood on loan from Leeds last summer. They even negotiated a 1.5 million release or I guess buyout trigger in his loan contract as well, which meant that Middlesbrough they did have an element of control over whether they wanted to sign him. They obviously chose not to, but that was Middlesbrough's prerogative. It was a similar situation with Luke Ayling. He joined from Leeds in the January transfer window. But similar to George Edmondson, his contract was expiring in the summer, which meant that for Middlesbrough, it was a perfect opportunity to kind of give him a bit of an audition, see how he got on at Middlesbrough, and then make a decision on his future in the summer. Obviously, for Ayling, it was a real success during his time at the Riverside on loan last season. and that meant that when it did get to the summer months, it was a bit of a no-brainer for Middlesbrough to go out and try and bring him in on a permanent basis, something which they clearly managed to do. So it's going to be an interesting one with George Edmondson to see how he gets on this summer. Kieran Scott, he spoke about Edmondson in his interview with the Middlesbrough official website, and Kieran Scott said, George is coming in to help us at the minute to navigate a centre-back issue, but we see a future in George as well. We think he's someone who can be a future asset. We're in a good position on that loan. We'll see how he settles down. I'm sure he'll be playing soon. That's highly likely, given the number of injuries that Middlesbrough have. We will get onto this in a little bit, just in terms of the fixtures that Middlesbrough have coming up. But yeah, it's going to be a very interesting signing for Middlesbrough with George Edmondson. He's someone who knows the Championship well, someone who is likely to get a lot of minutes, particularly early on in his time at the Riverside. And yeah, I guess now that there's a bit of a long-term focus in terms of his future at the club, it's going to be very interesting to see how he settles down and to see whether he fits into Michael Carrick's plans, and to see whether Carrick is ultimately convinced by him at the end of the season to potentially offer him a permanent contract. Middlesbrough's home match with Preston on Saturday afternoon is going to be quite an interesting one for one man in particular. That's Emmanuel Latte Lath, who will be playing at the Riverside for the first time since his deadline day walkout, I guess you could call it. Obviously, for those who aren't aware of the story, Ipswich Town came in with an offer for him on deadline day, a £20 million offer, which Middlesbrough were very quick to reject. There was also a bit of uncertainty on social media as to what was going on with regards to Latte Lath's future. Middlesbrough were travelling down to Cardiff that day. Reports emerged that he was part of the squad who was going to be travelling to Cardiff. And the next thing you knew, there was another update saying that Latte Lath had refused to travel with the squad, obviously giving the illusion that he'd spat out his dummy somewhat over not getting his move. Now, according to all reports and according to a lot of people from Middlesbrough who've spoken out, that hasn't been the case. It sounds like there was fairly amicable, friendly talks between Latte Lath and Middlesbrough with regards to his future. Michael Carrick came out and spoke glowingly of the striker and his conduct and the fact that he loves Middlesbrough, and that those talks were very positive. It wasn't him sulking or anything like that. Kieran Scott came out in his interview and said a similar sort of thing. Everyone spoke very highly of Latte Lath, and ultimately actions speak louder than words, and Latte Lath did travel down to Cardiff independently from the rest of the squad. He jumped in his car, drove down to Cardiff to make sure that he was there and available for that championship match 2 weeks ago. Obviously, given the distraction and I guess given his lack of input into the preparations for the game, Michael Carrick chose not to start him against Cardiff, but he did come off the bench, which was a real telltale sign that he is going to be reintegrated back into the squad. And for Middlesbrough, it's going to be quite an interesting situation to handle. I think going into that day, Latte Lath was probably one of the most popular players in Middlesbrough's squad. His goal scoring speaks for itself. He was brilliant at the back end of last season. But the fact that it's his work rate and his energy and the way that he drives the team forward by leading the line, which has really got fans on his side. But it's going to be very interesting to see how fans respond to him at the Riverside on Saturday. I think supporters will generally get behind him. He is a Middlesbrough player. The noise is coming out of the club that he didn't throw a tantrum, I guess. He didn't spit his dummy out of the fact that he didn't get a move, and so it seems like he's going to be very focused on life at Middlesbrough and looking to do his best for the club moving forward. But I guess you've got to remember that it's going to be, you'd have to be naive to think that this situation might not happen again. A club in the Premier League could come in for him in January if he has a good few months with Middlesbrough. And obviously that would mean that a similar situation could arise if his head is turned by a move to the Premier League as it was on deadline day. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how fans react to him. It'll also be interesting to see how Michael Carrick responds to what's gone on. I guess the positive for Middlesbrough is that we are, I guess, now a little bit sort of blessed with more options in those attacking areas. Tommy Conway arrived from Bristol City. We've started to see a bit of what he's capable of. He obviously got his goal from the penalty spot before the international break. He started that game against Cardiff and has looked dangerous. He looked like a good player and someone who I personally would have full confidence in leading the line or playing in a slightly deeper position. Middlesbrough also have a range of other talents in those attacking areas who could like dip in and out. You could tinker with the makeup of that team. Obviously, you've got Ben Doak, who joined from Liverpool, Liverpool on loan. You've got Mika Hamilton, who got a little bit of game time during August, but he'll be hoping to kick on and become a much more influential player. So there are options there for Michael Carrick. Personally, I think Emmanuel Latte Lath will start. I think it'll be business as usual. I do still think that he's our best forward. And so he's someone who I think should be starting against Preston at the weekend. But it will be interesting to see what happens, because if Michael Carrick does decide not to start him, you then start to wonder, is there something else going on behind the scenes, or is everything not quite as rosy as the noises have suggested, I guess, coming out of the club. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting one for Latte Lath. An interesting decision for Michael Carrick to make in terms of whether he starts. And I think for the striker himself, it's going to be important that he gets supporters on side. I don't think it'll be too hard to do that. I think the Middlesbrough supporters, from my experience, will be supportive of him in the stadium, and they will get behind him as long as he's playing in a Middlesbrough shirt. And I think it will just be really important for him to go out there, give it his all, put in his usual amount of work rate, and maybe even get a goal or two. That would be ideal. Just to get supporters back on side and kind of put this whole situation behind him. I think it'll be really important for him to be out there to front up to it. There might be a little bit of hostility from certain corners of the stadium, given that the noises were that he didn't want to be at the club, or that his head had been turned by a move to the Premier League. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting. A very interesting one with Latte Lath with regards to what happens. But yeah, I think he'll just be hoping to get this Preston game out of the way, face up to the fans, go out there, put in a good performance, and then hopefully this whole situation will be put to bed. And yeah, Latte Lath will be part of the Middlesbrough squad at least until January, hopefully banging in a few goals along the way. So as well as Latte Lath, Michael Carrick does have a number of big decisions to make in terms of his team selection. The international break has typically been quite kind to Middlesbrough in terms of players going away. But this break in particular, there's been a few players who've been heading off to all corners of the planet to play for their countries. Izzy Jones has been off with Guyana. Anthony Dijksteel's been off on international duty. Aidan Morris has been with the United States. They played against Canada, and he came off the bench and got an assist. I think that was his first senior appearance for the USA as well, which was really great for him. But all of these journeys do take a lot out of players, and so it'll be very interesting to see how Carrick goes about handling that upon their return. For Aidan Morris, for example, it may be that Michael Carrick does look to change things up in midfield. He does have Dan Barlaser, who will be fit and raring to go. Johnny Howson, depending on his injury situation. We haven't had an injury update at the time of recording, but hopefully he will be fit and ready to go as well. So it might be that one of those two comes in alongside Hayden Hackney. Hayden Hackney obviously has been away with England under 21s, but it's been a much more domestic excursion, I guess, with them. So he should come back fairly fresh, despite playing a couple of games over the international break. There's also other decisions that will need to be made. We mentioned before about George Edmondson. Will he be deemed ready to start for Middlesbrough? That'll be an interesting one to look out for. The left-back situation with Lucas Engel or Neto Borges, it'll be interesting to see who Michael Carrick puts his faith in at left-back. Borges started against Cardiff before the international break. Lucas Engel had been the first choice previous to that. So it'll be interesting to see whether Borges keeps the shirt for the match against Preston, or whether a bit of a 2-week break might have revitalised Lucas Engel and maybe given him a chance to restore some of that confidence and challenge for that left-back spot himself. That'll be an interesting one to look out for. I mentioned before as well about the likes of Mika Hamilton and Ben Doak. They'll be chomping at the bit to be involved, ideally from the start, from their point of view. Those opportunities could come. There's a bit of uncertainty about the fitness of Riley McGree at the moment, and whether he'll be ready. I mentioned about Izzy Jones, who's been away in Africa on international duty. It could be the ideal opportunity to give him a little bit of a rest or name him on the bench, just so he's not thrust straight back into the action. And as I said, Middlesbrough do have a lot of different options in those attacking areas. Mentioned as well about Latte Lath and his future, and the fact that he's sticking around at the club. But it could be that Michael Carrick decides to name him on the bench, make a bit of a statement with regards to his head being turned by the interest from Ipswich. excuse me, Tommy Conway is there, and he'll be chomping at the bit to be involved as well. He's looked quality in his couple of appearances for Middlesbrough so far, so I certainly wouldn't have any concerns if he was to be named in the starting 11. But that's going to be another big decision for Michael Carrick. But I think the main thing is that Middlesbrough need to go into it with the idea of getting 3 points. The next 5 games are going to be very, very tricky as far as Middlesbrough are concerned. The table does start to kind of take shape, I guess, at this point of the season. At the moment, it's still very, very early. So the league table, you kind of have to take it with a bit of a pinch of salt. But by the time you get to the October international break, you're kind of approaching sort of double digits for fixtures played, which means that the table maybe has slightly more validity in terms of the way that it's shaping up. And for Middlesbrough, it's going to be really, really important to be up near the top of the table. I've said this before in previous videos that Middlesbrough really need to kind of raise the bar in terms of what they're targeting in the Championship. Last season and the season before, we were very much kind of a side who were hoping to get into the playoffs. We were maybe in that group of teams that were kind of hoping to squeeze into 6th position. We were maybe 7th or 8th or 9th in the table at any given point in the season. Last season, we were maybe 3 points off the playoffs or 5 points off the playoffs or 7 points. And it's just like, oh, well, if we can put a good run together, then maybe we can just squeeze in there. But I think the onus is on Middlesbrough to really kind of take control of their own destiny, as cheesy as that sounds. If Middlesbrough can keep recording victories, keep picking up positive results, then I think the club would be in a really good position for challenging for promotion. I said at the start of the campaign that I don't see any reason why Middlesbrough can't be challenging for the automatic promotion positions. There aren't really any standout sides in the Championship this season, in my personal opinion. We've kind of seen that with how open the division looks at the moment. You've got Sheffield United, who are struggling a little bit, Luton, who have been really struggling after suffering relegation. Then up near the top of the Championship, you've got people like Sunderland, who no one really expected to be leading the way at this point. Watford, they were expected to struggle, and they're right up there under Tom Cleverley, who was doing a brilliant job in the early stages of the season. So for Middlesbrough, it's a huge opportunity to go out there and just really kind of take control of their own promotion hopes this season. I've always said that Middlesbrough, if they can get an average of 2 points a game, that would see them just about up there. By my calculations, it means that based on what we've seen so far, I think Middlesbrough are maybe 1 point behind that, which isn't too bad. It doesn't mean we're kind of falling behind, but I think for Middlesbrough, it'll be really important to get a good tally of points over these next games, with 15 points up for grabs over the next cluster of games before the next international break. I think the Middlesbrough should be looking to get into double digits, maybe get 10 or 11 points over those games. There are some tricky ones in there. Obviously, there's the trip to Sunderland, which will be an interesting outing. Based on last season, it's one that Middlesbrough will be confident of going into and picking up a result. But as I said before, Sunderland are doing really well this season. And I think when Sunderland are on form, they're a side who can really cause problems for any team. So, yeah, for Middlesbrough, it's going to be very, very important to pick up results in these next few games. And if we can do so, it'll put us in a really good position going into the deep, dark winter when fixtures really start to pile up. Just to make sure that Middlesbrough are firmly in that promotion picture and not outsiders who are kind of hoping for a slip up from elsewhere or hoping for a miraculous kind of run of form to get us into the top 6 in the first place. So, yeah, it's going to be an interesting few weeks for the club. There's going to be more videos coming from me over the coming weeks and months. As I said, please do hit like on the video if you've enjoyed it. Please do hit subscribe as well and let me know if there is anything that you would like me to discuss during that time. But yeah, in the meantime, up the Boro. So pleased the international break's over because I find it so boring. But yeah, up the Boro and back to the Riverside on Saturday for what will hopefully be a big 3 points.